So the truth is that most people don't fail because they're off path. They fail because they quit when their alignment becomes terrifying. You get to this point when you're called forward to do something, when you're starting to hear that inner voice which is actually asking you to commit to something like a new level for yourself. And eventually, this is gonna lead you to this threshold moment where it brings up so much emotion in you, so much fear in you, that the only way is either to turn around and stop, or to actually face that fear, that emotion that's coming up, and to move through. Now, this threshold moment is the time when most people tend to turn around. And often it's because they feel like this amount of negative emotion is actually a bad feeling and they should move away from it. But the biggest changes in my life that I've experienced, and also working with the people that I've worked with, I've seen this pattern come up again and again and again, that we reach these threshold moments and it's just on the other side of when this fear and this emotion has peaked, this resistance has peaked, that the biggest quantum leaps happen, the biggest timeline shifts happen, the biggest shifts in our identity occur. It's all on the other side of this peak resistance. And there's been many, many times in my life that I can think that this has occurred. But I'm going to tell you a little story about one particular time when it was so lucid, it was so intense, that it really brings home the point here. And this was several years ago when I had this dream that it was so powerful, so potent, that in the morning I just felt this crazy intuitive guidance that I needed to go to Peru, spend some time in the Amazon and sit with ayahuasca. Now, at the time, I was like so used to living in London. I wasn't really the adventurous sort, although I think part of me had always dreamed of being like that. I'd always loved adventure books as a kid and, escape from prison stories and all this kind of stuff. Anything that felt really exciting and alive. But I had this dream happen, this guidance happen, and I was like, man, am I actually going to do this? But there was so much fear that came up. The resistance was insane. There was like, my nervous system was just fully rejecting the idea because I hadn't done a lot of psychedelics in my life, but the times I had done it had been a little bit traumatic and it really put me off. But the guidance was so clear, it felt so strong. It felt like this is something I really should do. So as I got closer and closer to actually getting on that flight from London, I mean, this had been building up now for about 4 or 5 months, the planning of actually going, sorting the money out and getting myself prepared. But as that time had got closer and closer to actually getting on the plane to Peru, the resistance in my system was insane. Like, I have never felt that amount of anxiety building up in my body. And I suffered from a lot of anxiety back then, but it became so palpable in my system. And I flew over to this jungle city called Iquitos, which is literally just surrounded by jungle, tuk-tuks flying everywhere. It was all like so new to me, but all the while I was like, experiencing all these crazy new things, like the fear of actually going to sit with ayahuasca in the jungle was like just crazy high. So I remember even going down on this low boat on one of the Amazon estuaries, just one of these little rivers, and being kind of in awe of where I was, of like these new surroundings. It was so different having swapped like the concrete grey of London for this, adventure in the jungle, traveling down the river. It was so unusual. And it was the first time I'd ever really adventured solo. And as I got there to this little encampment in the middle of the jungle, after I'd settled in for a while, I had to go and have this meeting with the shaman. And, you know, it was so mystical, it was so exciting. But that fear, that resistance that I should not actually do the ceremony was like stronger and stronger within me. And, you know, eventually it did actually put me at ease a little bit having this time with the shaman, but it was still like a crazy amount of fear coming up in me. And when it actually came down to being in the ceremony, like I was in this beautiful wooden maloka, which is like a round wooden temple, and it was just surrounded by like the life of the jungle, the sound of the jungle. And it was just such an incredible experience being in there, but at the same time as like kind of being in amazement of the situation I was in when that cup of ayahuasca was actually in my hands. Like the resistance reached its peak, and I was honestly, I could have just walked out there at that point because I was so afraid of what was to come. And I think really what was happening was that I can look back now and see that parts of my ego were in so much resistance to it and creating such resistance within my body because there was a threshold moment where my parts of my ego needed to die in order for it to reorganize into this new identity, this new version of myself that was going to come out the other side. And after that night in the ceremony, honestly, I was never really, I feel like I changed, you know, but not in like, certainly not in a bad way. Like whatever I had gone there for, I achieved in my time there in that jungle. The 2 weeks I spent there, I came out a different person, but it really wasn't so much about the power of the medicine. It was really way more about embracing my intuition over the fear and the resistance that was keeping me in the same place I'd been my whole life. There was this identity shift that had occurred from this flat white sipping East Londoner to this Amazon exploring adventurer. That's how it felt within me. And I spent another 4 weeks, like after that 2 weeks in the jungle, exploring Peru, traveling, meeting people. I came back from that trip a different version of myself. And it's clear to me that that buildup of resistance that occurred was equal to the shift in my identity and becoming more aligned with the truth of who I really was underneath my mind, at the essence of who I was. The amount of resistance was equal to the amount I shifted into the truth of who I was. And because there was so much resistance, it was a big shift within me. So this is quite a big kind of dramatic version of how these moments of resistance show up within us. We can often, but it's just one example because there's so many times that on a smaller scale, when we're trying to do something in our lives, we're trying to step into a bigger version of ourselves, whatever it is you're being called to do, whether you're being called to start a new business or start a new project, whatever it is that you're looking to step into, you're gonna eventually hit these moments, you're gonna hit these threshold moments where your emotions are very much resisting the action you need to take. Other examples I can give of this are when I made my first YouTube video. There was a lot of resistance around that. I remember when I did my first coaching session, just the idea of actually taking someone through a session, there was a lot of resistance I had through that. And yeah, on the other side of these moments, you always feel this aliveness in your system. You feel so much more this expanded state of being that you've entered into. These moments of high levels of resistance are these most beautiful signposts that you're actually very aligned after all. Now, sometimes people can get confused at these moments because, and will really want to turn back, put the brakes on, because they don't know whether it's this kind of resistance they're feeling in their bodies, in their system, is coming from either just it being resistance to change, like the survival mode of the ego, just wanting to keep things the same no matter what, if it's coming from that, or if it's actually coming from misalignment. Like, should I actually not do this thing after all? And a really good way I can tell you of actually figuring this out is just to take yourself away from the situation and do whatever it takes to relax your nervous system, whether that's go for a walk in the woods, go for a swim in the sea if you're near the sea, maybe meditate, maybe do some yoga, whatever it takes just to calm everything down and release that emotional charge. If when you're in that relaxed, neutral state, and you look at that action that you're looking to take, and it still feels like you have that it's not the right way forward, but you're staying in this neutral state, then maybe you are misaligned. But there's a very good chance that by letting go of that fear, you start to see that the resistance really was just emotional, and it really was just part of your ego that is clinging on for survival, because so much of our lives is spent with the ego trying to keep us in the same place, the same identity, even if that means us being miserable. That's the trap. Like, it's like it triggers this fear within us, and that fear is actually keeping us in the same loops we're trying to escape. So sometimes we just got to recognize it for what it is, and recognize that we can move through that action, take that action, because it's important to recognize that ultimately the ego isn't getting destroyed, it's just getting reorganized. And when it starts to recognize that, it can soften its resistance as well. So whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that you're looking to change in your life, whatever it is that you're reaching for, whatever goals you have, just recognize that when you're reaching these peak levels of resistance, that there's very strong emotions coming up. You're in just the right place. And there's a very, very high chance that you're perfectly aligned and ready to step into a much more aligned version of yourself, an identity which is more representative of the truth of who you are, as well as shifting into a reality that you really want to experience. A life that feels more magical, a life that has better quality relationships, a life where you feel more fulfilled. All of these things are on the other side of crossing these highly charged emotional thresholds and stepping into that next version of yourself, which is just waiting on the other side. So I hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and I'm just wishing you the best wherever you are on your journey. And if you want to catch up with more kind of inspiration of this type, I'm going to be writing more about this type of thing in my newsletter, so you can sign up in the link below. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.